Now we've come to the second part of our study on the book of Revelation. So today we will be looking at four basic interpretations that goes hand in hand with the question of Kuya Bayani a while ago and the interpretation question raised by Brother Martin also. And so the first one is idealism. Okay. So idealism, this strips away the symbolic language of any predictive value and reduces the prophecy to a picture of the continuous struggle between good and evil, the church and paganism, and of the eventual triumph of Christianity. This approach contains a kernel of truth, but arises mainly from a predisposition against genuinely predictive prophecy and from embarrassment over the extravagance of apocalyptic language. So idealism, how to interpret it is like two categories, good and evil, and you look at it from that perspective, and then so it's not taken literally, but at the same time, the very object here is to see the ongoing struggle and victory of righteousness over evil. Preterism. So preterism is, if you're familiar with the meaning of the text back then, which is for the original readers and listeners of the book of Revelation, this is the way to interpret it. So preterism is an interpretation that applies only to the past, no? So the book of Revelation was addressed to a community living in the past, no? And for with regards to the future generations, that is not the concern. Another way of saying it, there is the concept of a future fulfillment is being devoid, no, in the idea of preterism. But this shares the predisposition by the idealism, limits revelation to describing the persecution of Christianity by ancient Rome and to what was expected to happen by way of the destruction of the Roman Empire and the vindication of Christians as the supposedly near return of Christ. Of course, under this view, Jesus did not return yet. So, there is a commentary available, the book of Revelation, from a preterist point of view. And that is very interesting because it's like a time travel. It takes you back during the time and the persecution of the first century and how the message of the book of Revelation was read during their time. So it's, I would advise, no, if you get an opportunity to find a commentary that is interpreted from a preterist point of view. Some Roman Catholic theologians see rather the book of Revelation from a preterist point of view. So I'm just giving you a tip that it is still being held not today. So God's people cannot understand the problem of evil in history or why such fearful sufferings and persecutions before them. The solution is found in the view that God has turned this age over to the powers of evil, but is soon to intervene to destroy evil and establish his kingdom. Again, what I was mentioning in the first segment of our study, the thesis and antithesis between the rule of God and the seemingly powerful position that was vested to evil powers, no? So the message of the apocalypse is addressed to their own contemporaries and in no way contains prophecies of the future. So again, how is preterist interpreted? So it is just a conversation between John and the first century disciples who were being persecuted. So for the later, as a message of comfort for later generations, no, that's not, taken from that motive. Now this is it's a historicism. This interpretation, which was favored by the reformers, sees in the revelation the prophecy of the history of the church. Specific events, nations, personages are sought in church history that fit. Seals, trumpets, bowls, etc. The most important identification in this interpretation is the identification of the beast and the false prophet with papacy. Remember, this is an interpretation born out of the separation of the Protestant Church from the Roman Catholic Church, and that also led to Protestant reformers such as Martin Luther and even Johannes Calvinus to see the Pope as the Antichrist being referred to. So it's really seeing the book of Revelation as a book of history, or a book that tells of their history during their time during the Reformation. But this is now beginning to be, not receiving not much attention from the interpreting community. And so we go with futurism. This is a fourth way of looking at it. Excuse me. This also, the Revelation describes a coming painful and chaotic time called the tribulation, immediately followed by the return of Christ, the advent of God's kingdom, the last judgment, and the eternal state. And so, futurists usually calculate the tribulation or Daniel 70th week. Daniel 9, 7 years in length with perhaps only the latter 3.5 years intensely distressing. That is why there is still a division called a tribulation and then a great tribulation, which means the situation is worsening during the 3.5 years. Also, they hold to the, if you hold to futurism, most likely the reader also holds to premillennial view that upon the return of Christ will rule the world and with the saints for 1,000 years, crush a satanically inspired rebellion at the close of this millennium, and preside at the last judgment before the eternal state begins. So you see, it's a mouthful, no? It's really loaded, and just to think of each of these terms is really there's a lot of things to unpack, no? With regards to these issues. So still on the futurists, the futurists hold that the first 3 chapters of Revelation apply either to the day in which the book was written, or else that the 7 churches of Asia represent 7 eras of church history, bridging the gap from the apostolic age to the return of Christ. And so the 7 churches that I described or showed in a chart in the first part of our study, according to one interpretation, or the so-called classical dispensational interpretation, is that the 7 churches refer to 7 different stages of church history. Okay? And so if there are 7 churches, the time of the apostles symbolize the church of Ephesus, no? If we are going to follow that type of interpretation. And the seventh church is the period of the church of Laodicea, refers to our time today. So we are now if we follow the chart by classical dispensationalism, Then the seventh church is that represents our time of Christianity today. It's like a Laodicean church. No. To this extent, the futurists are historicists, not because they're borrowing the model that the book of Revelation is a chart of sequential histories or sequential record of histories. The beginning with the phrase in 4:1, the things which must come to pass hereafter, they contend that the remainder of the book deals with events that will take place in a period called the Great Tribulation, just preceding the return of Christ. There will be, and then variously estimated from 3.5 to 7 years in length, according to Merrill Tenney. Views on the millennial reign. I'll just be quick on this because again, this is not a hermeneutical course. Just to introduce you to how the millennial reign or reigns are being perceived. Now, the first one is a post-tribulation premillennial. So there will be a period of tribulation, and then the second coming, then the millennial reign. Now, for a pre-tribulation, with in parenthesis is dispensational premillennialism. The stages is as follows. So there will come a time in the future. In the case of this chart, it's still not fulfilled from the perspective of most dispensationalists, since Jesus or the rapture hasn't taken place. So when Jesus comes during the second coming, there will be a rapture of the church, and then the tribulation will begin. Tribulation on earth. And then second coming with the church, or appears a return to earth in order for the saints or the believing communities to reign on earth, and that will be 1,000 years. So that comprises the millennial reign. And you could see at the end of it, there is a last judgment. For a post-millennial perspective, it is that in the many years in history, the time this was a concept believed during the Enlightenment period, perhaps 18th to 19th centuries, no? Because of the advancement in progress, of course, when we say advancement in progress, that refers to European, no? To the European continent and to the advantage of the Europeans during the colonial era. When we say during the colonial era, so to the disadvantage of the nations that the European powers and America colonized, no? And they believed, according to them, because of this event of progress, that we have now entered the millennial reign. Okay? As by virtue of the expansion of Christianity among the different nations within the world, within the colonial world. Okay? So that is post-millennialism. So, and the fourth one is Amil, or it's a symbolic millennium. And so in this millennialism, the belief is that by the coming of Christ, then the presence of Christ in the world, beginning with again his appearance with the 12 disciples and the early Christians. So that for millennials is already the experience of the millennial reign. Just to give a short summary of this very difficult discussion, not very difficult. It's just not easy, but not easy is difficult. But you know what I mean. Let's talk about dispensationalism. Okay. looking back to the four types of interpretation that was presented a while ago, dispensationalism captures both preterism and futurism. Okay? And what is the reason for that? Because we look at the 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 hermeneutical um, strategy wherein we first look at how the message is taken historically. No, that is for the preterist view. And what are the future implications of this message? That is why it's a combination of two. That's why there is always this invitation to look at it from a preterist view first, to lay down the interpretation, how the early believers perceive the message. And then, of course, the second part is, how does it speak to us today, which is the future of, the present is the future of the early church. Here, John Nelson Darby, the beginning of systematized dispensationalism is usually linked with John Nelson Darby, a Plymouth Brethren minister. While at Trinity College in Dublin, Darby came to believe in a future salvation and the restoration of the national Israel. Remember, this is 1819, no? This prior to World War II. Based on a study of Isaiah 32, Darby concluded that Israel in a future dispensation would enjoy earthly blessings that were different from the heavenly blessings experienced by the church. It does so a clear distinction between Israel and the church. And that also has something to do with John Nelson's observations that when you read the Bible, there are prophecies that are yet unfulfilled. You know? So because these promises have been are yet to be fulfilled. Prophecies, no? So there is still a missing seventh day, no? If you're going to look at it from a seventh day category. Darby also came to believe in any moment rapture of the church that was followed by Daniel's 70th week, in which Israel would once again take center stage in God's plan. After this period, Darby believed there would be a millennial kingdom. Of course, after rapture, there will be, which God would fulfill his unconditional promise with Israel. And for Darby's perspective, I believe that the seventh day is the millennial reign. So if we're going to categorize that, so hold on, we will talk about that later on. So according to Paul Edge, Darby advanced the scheme of dispensationalism by noting that each dispensation places man under some condition, and of course, man has some responsibility before God. These are the 7 dispensations held by Darby. Okay, so according to him, each dispensation culminates in failure. Darby saw 7 dispensations. First, from paradise to the flood, and then presence of Noah, and then Abraham. Later on, the what we call situation of Israel, and then the dispensation of the Gentiles, and then the dispensation of the Spirit, and then the millennium. So there was, since we could say that Filipino evangelical Christianity / Filipino Protestant churches are highly influenced by the Americans, no? So we see here the belief in dispensationalism has grown, especially in North America. So there were conferences such as the ones led by James H. Brooks, no? A prominent figure in the Niagara conferences, disseminated dispensationalist ideas through his ministry and publications. So the resulting idea for for our Filipino students here is that the majority of if I'm not mistaken, but by virtue of observation, the most held way of interpreting the Book of Revelation in the Philippines, no? Again, in my observation, is is dispensational because of the way the American missionaries handed down this means of looking at the text. These men, referring to those who were mentioned there, activist evangelicals evangelists who promoted the host of Bible conferences and other missionary and evangelistic efforts. They also gave the dispensationalist movement institutional permanence by assuming leadership of the new independent Bible Institute such as yung Moody Bible Institute, and not mentioned here yung yung Dallas Theological Seminary in Texas. Scofield, si Charles I. Scofield reworked the presentation or 7 dispensations presented by John Darby, and this is the one which is more a popular presentation. First, it is the dispensation of innocence or freedom, and then when sin came as a result of Adam and Eve's disobedience, so there was now the dispensation of conscience, and then later on, from the time of Noah, which is described as a good person or a person who followed God, until the time of Abraham, it's described as a dispensation of government. And then when you see what preceded Abraham is the patriarchal rule or the dispensation of the patriarchal rule. Remember, this is prior to the giving of the law, since Moses was the yung important figure when we look at the fifth dispensation as described here, from Moses until the coming of Christ, or we could say, we could put a margin until John the Baptist. And then on the 6th is the Kuya Bay, meron kang question? Sige. So, and then the 6th is a dispensation of grace, which is, if we look at this chart, according to this presentation, we are now on the 6th dispensation. Diba? Because the 7th is the time of rest of a literal earthly, so it's still underway, hindi pa nagaganap, not yet fulfilled. Each one of these dispensations is said to represent a different way in which God deals with man and woman, of course, specifically a different testing. These periods are marked up in Scripture by some change in God's method of dealing with mankind in respect to 2 questions of sin and of human responsibility, explained by Charles Scofield. He said each of the dispensations may be regarded as a new test of the natural man, and each ends in judgment, marking his utter failure, referring to human beings, to in every dispensation or every dealing with every dealing of God with humankind. This follows again the question posed earlier. So what we call literal hermeneutics. Hermeneutical approach that stresses a literal fulfillment of Old Testament promises to Israel. Still, class, this is associated with dispensationalism, di ba? Though the issue of literal interpretation is heavily debated today, many dispensationalists claim that consistent literal interpretation applied to all areas of the Bible, including the Old Testament promises to Israel, is a distinguishing mark. Excuse me.